All right, Mackenzie, today we are watching FernGully, a movie which in 1992 aimed to save the climate. I think it's been a rousing success 30 years later. No more climate issues, so that's great. But I want to start today off by asking you, what's your favorite tree? Do you have a favorite tree? I don't know that a lot of people do have one, but what's yours?
Well, I guess in true Mackenzie fashion, I have a lot of favorite trees.
Of course you do. Of course you have 18 favorite trees.
Okay, not 18, but several.
Okay.
So I think if I went, oof, it's funny that I know these immediately, by the way. Like I'm such a tree hugger. This movie is my jam. I'm so excited. But yeah, so I think in order, like a willow tree is maybe my
Okay.
favorite tree. I think it's beautiful and it sounds lovely. And a lot of the other trees that are my faves are for similar reasons. Like I love an aspen tree, also beautiful, love the leaves, but it sounds really nice in the wind. And then another one that is actually the bane of Texans' existence that I also love for sound only is a hackberry tree. I actually love a hackberry tree. It's one of the most beautiful sounds in the world. Problem with those is they will just break at random. Like branches will just completely fall
Oh.
down and like ruin your yard, potentially hit people. They're very dangerous. But they're beautiful and they sound beautiful. Um
That's probably where somebody got well, I don't want to spoil The Happening, that incredible film for anybody, but that's probably where somebody got the idea of like this tree's trying to kill people. It's
100%. That was based on a hackberry. It's got to be. It's got to be. But yeah, final honorable mention would be a pine tree. I love pines. I grew up hanging out in the Lost Pines area, and it's very nostalgic for me. But yeah, I love all the trees. I love them all, but those are my faves. Do you have a favorite tree?
I think all mine are, with the exception of Christmas Tree, which I think you already kind of mentioned, but the rest of them are all fictional. Like I like Groot a lot. He's in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. I like the Ents from Lord of the
Oh,
Rings.
Ents are a
You
great
know?
tree. That's an excellent pick.
Yeah,
Excellent pick. I'll allow it. Solid
there you go.
submission.
And then I love the trees that my drug dealer gives me. Just kidding. I don't do
Mm.
drugs, but you know,
But if you did, you would love
if
them.
I did, I would fucking love them.
Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Lamar.
And we are continuing our celebration of AniMay, which again, I'm not going to explain for the umpteenth time, but it's just animated movies in the North American area, generally speaking. Great. All right. And we are continuing with FernGully, The Last Rainforest. I am stoked. But just starting us off, what are we drinking?
Well, I mixed up. I always feel weird when I take, as you guys know, I am learning how to mix, so I always feel weird when I take an existing recipe. I don't want to change the name because it already exists, so it feels unfair to call it my own. But I took this recipe I found online for a Japanese slipper, which is equal parts Midori, which is green, Cointreau, and lemon juice. I added a little bit of blue curacao to it to give it a darker green tint in honor of today. So instead of a Japanese slipper, we'll call it a Japanese fern because I'm just saying I didn't make this drink, but I wanted to, represent the film.
I love it. How cute. Okay. Well, we had similar wavelengths as far as doing something tree or rainforest related. Mine is a mix of gin, ginger liqueur, fresh squeezed orange, some pomegranate, some lime, some simple syrup, and a little red pepper. One little spicy poo.
That's gracious.
And I call it the fairy sight.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
And I put it in a mule cup because I want it to be nice and chilled and ice. It's cubed. It's got a little orange slice garnish, but it is a fever tree mule cup, so it's got a pretty tree on it as well.
I
So,
do like ginger beer. They make ginger beer, right? Fever Tree. Right that up?
yeah, and sodas, yeah, all those kinds
Okay,
of things
cool.
in general.
You can also tell which one of us lives with somebody who used to 10 bars at some point in their life because you have like this 8 ingredient cocktail. And I'm just like, I found this thing on Google and I put some extra blue curacao in it.
When we married, or we're not married, but when we married our bars together,
Hmm.
it became a super bar. So we have an alarming amount of things in the house for sure. But cheers.
Cheers.
Alrighty, so let's get into it. I'm just warning y'all. This is basically going to be an hour-ish of me fangirling this movie because I fucking love it. So, FernGully, The Last Rainforest, 1992. So much nostalgia for me. So such a great cast, all the wonderful things, but we'll get to that in a second. Some of the basics. It has a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb for ratings, and then Rotten Tomatoes is similar. It's 67% critics, 64% for audience. So, all quote unquote fresh, but just in the sixes range, generally speaking.
Which I
Um,
think upon rewatch for I know you said this is gonna be an hour of you fangirling. I think I'm gonna be more of a I remember how much I loved it when I was a kid. I'm gonna look at it from the lens of watching it modern day, but I think that 6.5 is pretty accurate to where I would put this. Has a great message though. I think it's doing something that a lot of animated films don't do, which is taking a stand on something. But yeah, I would right around there.
Yeah, it definitely takes a stand, and I think that's maybe why it was hard for people to watch then or now, because it makes you look hard at what you're doing to the earth and whether or not you're treating it with the respect it deserves. But we'll get into that. Some of the basics. Director is Bill Croyer, and actually, I didn't even check anything that he's done. Do you have anything that he's done off the top of your head?
No, I have down that he mostly just was an animator. I think this is one of the only things he directed. He's worked on a lot of stuff, but it's always been in an animator capacity.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Maybe this is his first go round leading the charge. And I think from an animation perspective overall, it's still a really good animation. It's kind of fun fact, it's one of the earlier ones to start to use computer animation. It is largely like traditional animation on the whole, but there are some sequences that they did do some computer animation because it would make it a little bit easier. But
Huh.
this is not super pervasive yet at this point in the early 90s actually to do a lot of computer animation. So cool that they experimented with that here. As far as the writer, it's going to be for the screenplay, it's Jim Cox. It's based on the stories of Diana Young. She's the one who wrote the original like FernGully stories. So I think it's like her source material, and then he wrote the actual screenplay.
And Jim
But he's
Cox was no doubt high as fuck throughout his entire script writing process, right?
yeah, I could see that. I could see
Just
that.
the dialogue, like it's not just the theme of loving the earth and being one with the earth and all these things, but just the whole. I'm just like this dude was tripping balls while he wrote this script. I feel like.
I mean, I think he had some really funny lines on this. But yes, I could see it being that he was a little bit high for sure. He also has written a bunch of other, like some of my faves, I guess. Like he did Rescuers Down Under, which I love. And
Yep.
then he also did Oliver and Company, which is another one that I don't think is, I don't know, super popular, but I always really liked Oliver and Company. So yeah, other fun animated films that he's done. But yeah, then based on Diana Young's source material, where those are actually, if I recall correctly, I never read them, but I like heard about them. I think they're like little stories. I don't think it's one long story.
It's like a book of short stories or
I think it's
something.
like short stories from
Mm.
FernGully kind of thing, like stories
Oh,
from
okay.
from FernGully, the
Oh, it's
rainforest.
all
I
within
think is
like the same universe.
yeah, I
Mm.
think that's what it is, if I recall correctly, something like that, yeah. So now we got the cast and crew, which is pretty great, I think. We have, of course, I would say our lead generally is the character of Krista. That's played by Samantha Mathis. She's
Hmm.
not super pervasive in a way that I think you would recognize her. She's in a lot of TV. She did like American Psycho, she did Broken Arrow, but to me, like as a live action actress, I don't think a lot of people would recognize her. And I even in those films, I like struggle to place her.
I was
But
actually gonna say, I was hoping you were gonna say, to me, I only see her because to me, when I went through her history, I went, that's what I know her from. She was in the terrible Super Mario Brothers movie with John Leguizamo in the 90s, and she played Princess Daisy. So I'm just like,
see,
where do I
I
know her
saw
from?
that on her list, but I never saw that. So I didn't know that one.
Oh, you don't
Also,
want to see it. It's not even a so bad it's good film. It's just really bad.
it's just really bad. Well, the
Yeah.
new one is really, really good. We should have
Yeah.
included that in anime. Oh, now that I think about it, that one was so good.
Well, we got
Anyway,
1 week left. We'll talk.
I was gonna say, yeah, we might renegotiate. But here's another good one. Christian Slater is Pips. He is the redheaded fairy, in case you don't know who that is. But he's been in a bazillion things. But what was
Yeah.
funny is like we were talking about this off mic. A bunch of us, we were both were like, I thought it was more things, if that makes sense, like more
Mhm.
big things. But what I remember him most from as a kid, also 90s film, was Robin Hood, not Men in Tights,
And
Prince of Thieves. I
yeah.
almost said Men in
Yeah.
Tights. Very different vibes, guys. Totally different Robin Hoods. But he is in the serious one, the Prince of Thieves. And then he also was in Interview with the Vampire.
Mhm.
He's the journalist. And then you said True Romance is
Yeah,
what you
True
thought of,
Romance, which
right?
is the one that I know him from. I think that's probably his biggest film. An interesting fact is that Christian Slater and Samantha Mathis actually dated in real life, and they ended up doing this film together. They did Broken Arrow together. They did this a movie I haven't seen, Pump Up the Volume. So they ended up doing 3 films together while they were dating, which is interesting.
That seems like a terrible idea, if I'm being honest, but good for them, you know?
He's
I think
also weirdly, as I approach 40, and I know Christian, this is the sad thing, is Christian Slater's probably 10 or plus years older than me, but I get him as like a celebrity lookalike from people.
mhm.
And again, my feelings are a little hurt because they don't say you look like young Christian Slater. They're like, no, you look like how Christian Slater looks now. But he's got the Hollywood cheat code, so I'll still take it as a compliment.
I was gonna say, I think he still looks great because 'cause I've seen him somewhat recently. He did, Dirty John, which I think is a Netflix or
Hmm.
what something. It's a true crime-ish series. So I saw him in that, and he looks great. Yeah, totally fine.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll have to throw like a side by side of modern day Christian Slater and me, just so the listeners can tell us whether this is accurate or not. I also feel like he has this weird thing of maybe the reason we think he's in more is I mix him up with a lot of that era's white male actors of like an Ethan Hawke or a Steven Dorff. Like they were all getting big around the same time. So
Mm.
I assume they were all in more stuff when really it's like, oh, they're not the same person.
Yeah, I mean, all white guys look the same, right? Isn't
That
that
is
the
factual. I mean, I just said I look just like Christian
I
Slater,
think
so
it's yeah, I think it's just a fact. It reminds me of the Chris effect in Hollywood, you know, like Chris Pine,
mhm.
Chris Evans, Christopher Hemsworth, like all the Chris, they all look the same. Anyway, but yeah, it is a compliment, I think. Christian Slater is a gorgeous, gorgeous man. But yeah, we also have, of course, legendary Mr. Tim Curry as Hexus, which his voice is just so great, and it's like 0% surprising that he does this role so
I just
well.
wanna say, and I wanna preface this by saying I understand this is a children's movie, so I don't want anybody to be put off by this comment. But I'm speaking from personal experience and from talking to women in my life as well, of this movie, of this era was a sexual awakening for some folks of like, "Oh, I really like girls after seeing Krista," or, "Oh, I really like boys after seeing Pip or Zach." But I think for another third group of people, it turns out you're just really into Tim Curry. Because
Fuck
that
yeah.
voice and just his
Fuck yeah.
performances over the years, it's like
I'm in group
yeah.
number 3. Tim Curry is whoo, nice. Yeah, we love a Tim Curry. Obviously, super famous for Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is incredible, but, he also has done other legendary things like Clue.
Mm,
He did Dark Crystal, which is a fun one, but one of my favorite turns of his is in the also 90s film Three Musketeers, where he plays
oh,
Cardinal Richelieu, and he plays such a good bad guy. He's some
yeah,
incredible, like, one-liners in that movie, also weirdly a Disney movie, but it really so well done,
yeah.
love it,
Tim
and then,
Curry is
he's
he's a one of one.
he's a
He's a
one
treasure.
of one, like, he's the only one, and he's done a bunch of TV too, and a bunch of voiceover work, but even when he's done TV as, like, guest spots, he somehow makes it just totally his own. I remember he was on, I wanna say it was, like, Will& and Grace, like, 10 or 15 years ago, and I
Mm,
was like, "That's incredible." Like, he just still somehow he made this silly whatever comedy show on NBC just elevated by his presence because he makes everything better. So, yeah, we love a Tim Curry moment. We also have Jonathan Ward as Zach. So he's the blonde kid who comes in to the forest, a little immature, a little silly, learns a lot along the way, and he does not do a lot outside of this movie. He makes some short appearances in things like Steel Magnolias, some TV stuff, not
another
much
notoriously
else.
bad film called Mac and Me, about kind of
Oh
like an
my god.
ET ripoff that gets referenced a lot as a great bad movie.
Why do you watch so many bad movies, Lamar? You're like all the ones I know are the ones that are really bad.
I mean, it's just nice. Sometimes you just wanna sit there and just be able to talk during a film and be halfway invested, but when you can be funnier than the content you're watching, that's a good time, I feel like.
That's what it is. You were just challenging yourself, like, "How can I watch this movie and be funnier than this? I'm just gonna cut
That's
my comedy chops," is what it is.
pretty much a master pancake audition, if you will, for those in Austin. And last thing I wanted to say was apparently he retired from acting in 1998. I'm not sure what led to that really, but yeah, 6 years after this, he was just sort of done with acting.
He was already over it, man. Sometimes that happens, like the guy
Yeah.
from Game of Thrones we talked about who was like, "I am have been villainized in the real world. I'm not
Oh,
doing it
Joffrey
anymore." Yeah,
Baratheon. I feel so
Joffrey,
bad that I don't know Jack Gleason.
Jack
I'll give him the
Gleason.
respect of knowing his real name, which a lot of people don't.
Yeah, it's true. Well, he did Batman Begins, and so, I get it, I get it. We also have Grace Zabriskie, who I think that's how you say her last name. She
Mm.
is the narrator for, like, bringing us into the film, but also she's, Magi, the, like, kind of head fairy lady, and fun fact about her, she's been in all kinds of little things, like
Yeah.
TV and things like that. She hasn't done a lot that I think most people would recognize, but funnily enough to me, I looked at her picture on IMDb, and I was like, "She looks like Magi." Like, she gives me Magi vibes. If you go look at her picture, I'm like, "You could totally be a fairy." Like, in real life, you give me strong fairy vibes.
Was this
So
like one of the earliest mocap, like motion capture with the white dots on the face
right?
experiences? Kind of an Andy
Maybe.
Circus type thing for
Just
FernGully?
even the bone structure,
Yeah.
I don't know, her eyes, like, have this piercing ear energy. I don't know. I just was like, "Okay, that I buy you for Magi." So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
really.
remember her. I thought to myself, I know that voice, and I went and looked it up. And so she was in a video game that came out a couple years ago called The Quarry, which is a horror movie-esque video game.
Mm.
And in that, they actually do sort of a motion capture where her character looks exactly like the actress does. But I also remember, this is a random one, in the movie Armageddon. For those of you out there who are big Armageddon fans, she's at the very beginning when the guy discovers the asteroid and says, "I want to name it after my wife, Dottie." That's this woman. So interesting little thing there.
I did see she was in Armageddon, but I couldn't place her, like, I couldn't remember her, and I've seen it, but
Well,
not a
it's just
million
funny
times,
that
so
she's trying to save the world in this one, and then her character's the thing's trying to destroy the world in Armageddon. It's a total full circle
she's
of
got
life.
such range. She's such range is what it is. Yeah. Well, and then we also have to honorable mention, they're not major characters, but we gotta call out Cheech and Chong, Stump
Which,
and Root, man, because
which like
obviously
have they had the longest run of partnered up cameos in films of anyone ever?
it's gotta be. I mean, I
I can't think
can
of
you even think
anybody
I was
else.
gonna say, I can't think of one other that would even come close. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're so funny. Like, they're not major character heroes, but they got, like, some silly one-liners that are yeah, that complement each other very well. They're super funny. Like, and how fun must it be to work with basically your best friend in everything that you
Yeah.
do? That's
Yeah.
super cool.
And I assume at this point you are saving the best for last?
I mean, obviously,
Heck
Mr.
yeah.
Robin Williams as Batty Coda.
May he rest in
Uh
peace, man.
Man, truly, that one is one of the ones that hurts, I will tell you. But he is obviously legendary, hilarious, incredible. He is my favorite part about this movie by a long shot. But he has done, as we know, many, 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 many things. Has a comedy and drama range that is awesome. He did Mrs. Doubtfire, which I think he's super famous for, especially in this era, like around the same time. Good
Mhm.
Morning Vietnam, which is incredible. Bicentennial Man, Patch Adams, bunch of
Hook.
comedies, bunch of TV, Hook. Yeah, Hook is a classic. He's done everything to utter excellence every time. He's awesome. We love him.
And he
And he is,
apparently just laid down this is I wrote down the rap that Batty does is just the tour de force of Robin Williams. That is
oh,
him
yeah.
in a 2-minute nutshell of what he can do and what he was capable of. And he apparently laid down 14 hours of improvised lines for this film, so much so that the director added screen time. He tripled Batty's screen time from the
Yeah.
script because of how much Robin Williams was giving him.
Yeah, just improv. Like, and that's just the name of the game with him. He's just so funny and witty, and like he's done that in other films that he's been in. Mrs. Doubtfire, they have, as I'm sure people know, there's like an basically an NC-17 level rating of that film because the number of jokes he tried to work in there that didn't make the final cut. But yeah, it totally checks out. And like you said, that rap is just a tour de force, and like the references in it, it's so funny. I'm not doing it, so don't ask, but I know every word to that rap. Like,
Oh,
I love it. I
well,
love it.
next time at karaoke, that's gonna be your
That's the
go-to.
one. I hope they if they had that at karaoke, how cool would that be, to be honest? Like, somebody's gotta have that version at karaoke, that would be awesome.
Well, I've got a friend, named Eddie, and I'm so grateful to have him in my life for multiple reasons, but one of them is that he has his own karaoke machine, meaning you can just go on YouTube and look up any song you wanted. It doesn't have
Oh,
to be dependent on whatever, that karaoke
whatever
bar has
system.
licensed, yeah. And there's a lot of stuff on there. I
Interesting.
wouldn't be surprised if Batley's rap, so I'll invite Eddie over, we'll have a little karaoke party.
I was gonna say I could do it. I could crush it. I love it. All right. Well, quick summary before we get into the fun stuff. The magical inhabitants of a rainforest fight to save their home, which is threatened by logging and a polluting force of destruction called Hexus. And the magical inhabitants are fairies. Let's just be super clear.
Spoil
And I feel like that's really simplified, but to the point. I like it. It
better than
doesn't.
the James and the Giant Peach summary last week.
Yes.
It's like, a
Yes.
kid is friends with bugs.
I know, like, and we don't give any context to that.
No,
This is just they're
just
just friends with bugs. Love it. Why not? But people liked this when it came out enough to meet its budget, and then some. It made 32.7 million against a $24 million budget. Which always, I know I've said this before with these animation films, but always blows my mind when they have these huge budgets, but it makes sense. This is kind of, again, as I mentioned at the top, this is a traditional animation, takes a lot of hours
mhm.
and a lot of animators to achieve. So it kind of makes sense. And I think that's not the takeaway from the film. I think it's overall the message, but there are some
Yeah.
really cool animated sequences in this that I really love that we'll get to.
Yeah. I think that what makes this film cool and unique in its own way is that it is a fun movie and it is a kids movie and it did make a ton of money, but it does seem like the directors and the people involved do give a shit about what they're actually trying to like the message behind
Yep.
this. You get the sort of closing quote of for our children and our children's children. Like I think that
Mhm.
they were bought in on the whole thing. I know that there's you can go back and research it, but there the posters for the film were made out of recycled materials. The packaging of the toys was made, and this was before that was super popular. Nowadays everybody
Mhm.
recycles, but so it just seems like this movie is like very special in that way. Of everybody involved was actually bought into what they were trying to get across with it.
Yeah, they give a shit about this cause, and that
Hmm.
is it's a big part of why I say I have fangirls is a big part of why this film is close to my heart. Quick aside, and we can cut this if we want, but my mom raised me this way. I mean, again, from infancy, like I don't know a world in which I didn't recycle. My mom went through a whole conservationist certification process when I was very young. We volunteered regularly in and around Austin in parks for Earth Day. We recycled before there was single stream curbside recycling. Like we had all the bins outside that we pre sorted. We took them to the recycling center and we hand recycled every single thing. This was when the recycling center used to be down on like between 7th and 8th Street downtown. And like this was a weekly tradition. We had deep respect for the earth, for nature, for parks, for trees. And I just I don't get people who don't give a shit about our planet. And so this movie is such an homage to that for me that I love it so much. This message is so critical. None of the other shit that we care about as a society matters if there's not a planet for us to do any of it on,
Hmm.
right? So that's my little diatribe for the day. I just love this cause and I love that they cared so much about this cause and put it in a consumable film that is fun and beautiful and all the things. So
Yeah, I don't want to hear what the idiots nowadays would have to say about this as being like propaganda and shit because it's just like, dude, like you said, it's just all this other stuff is insignificant if our planet dies.
right.
None of these other issues will matter.
And just why would you want to hurt the planet that's giving us all life and
Hmm.
resources, all of it? I mean, just I don't understand that innate thought process. There was a story in the news this week of people literally dumping trash bins into the ocean off their boat. And that's the kind of blatant disrespect for the planet that I don't understand. And really that ties to his Zach at the beginning of this movie. And I think that's the cool thing that you see for him as a character is he comes to realize how important this is. And like I said, because I just grew up this way from literally being a baby, it's sometimes hard to teach someone that because it is innate to you. And what you see him go through is learning to respect the earth, learning to connect with the earth, and starting to give a shit versus, literally helping loggers destroy this forest and spray paint trees to mark them for cutting them down. And he evolves to being an advocate for this space. He literally wants to defend it and its life going forward. And that's a huge growth for him as a character.
I suppose. I mean, I agree, but also, can we talk about how Zach fucking sucks for at least the first 95% of the film?
That's
He
literally one of my first
just
notes is that Zach is kind of the worst. So
yeah.
it's the growth part is real critical because at first he super sucks.
And he's just like telling straight up lies about what the pain and then is it Batty or Batley? Batley's from Eureka's Castle. This is
Batty,
Batty.
batty.
Okay. Okay. And Batty is trying to say, oh, when humans come, then you get roads and buildings, and Zap hits him on the head to stop him from telling like the
Yeah,
truth of what
yeah.
happens.
He just lies
Yeah.
the whole time, and she asks him, she's like, "You don't have anything to do with that, do you? The logging?" And he's like, "Psh, no, of course not. I would never." And it's just because he wants her to, you know, basically put him back to his normal size, unshrink him, whatever, that
Hmm.
he is trying to get her to like him. And it's kind of your typical, I don't know, typical dude bullshit in a movie of like they don't care about something until a girl they likes cares about it. And that's his trajectory is like he ends up liking her and getting a crush on her. And so then he pays attention to what she has to say about, hey, let's not carve into the side of this tree that it hurts when you do these things. And he's like, I mean, what? What's the big deal? But
Yeah, he's a moron, and even the first scene you see him in, he's swatting at a bug, right? And I get that. There's a
mm,
mosquito flying around, you want to kill it. He makes it a point to chase after it in the middle of the fucking woods to try and kill a bug in the place where it lives. And I
right,
said to Janelle, I was like, if there was a bug in here, yes, I would probably, if depending on what it was, I would probably kill it. I don't want to fly
right.
flying around the apartment. But he's in the middle of the fucking woods, and he loves killing bugs so much that he's chasing it through the
Yeah.
woods. And yeah,
You're like, this is where this lives. This is its living room. You're in its living room. What do you came
oh,
here and you're
go
gonna try
you
and kill
bug.
it?
Yeah.
What a weird dude. So he does kind of suck, but really they all kind of suck. I mean, at first, like Pip seems to suck. He seems like such a bro. He seems like a Chad. Sorry, Chads. He's being very broy with his little, I don't know, mini gang over there.
Mhm.
And I just love how not into it Krista is one of my favorite parts where they're all coming and talking to her. And he says something about like, can I teach you something or whatever? And she's like, what can I learn from you? Like she just has zero respect for him at all the whole way through and thinks he's an idiot. He also gets better, thankfully, but at first he also sucks. And he's just like, I saw him playing flute at her moment and she like stuffs it with flowers and tells him to stop, and it reminded me so much of the Barbie, like all the guys playing guitar at the girls. I was like, why is this theme pervasive across all
Mm.
formats, just some dude playing a thing at you?
That's what was
um
missing from this. We needed some Matchbox 20, but I think it was before their time. So,
It
we'll give
was,
it a
it
pass.
was. It was. But, she's just not having it. She's just not into it. She cares more about what's going on in the forest, and she's just, yeah, literally running away from him. And then she learns that there's this pollution, that they've heard about Hexus, but they haven't seen smoke. She doesn't know what smoke is, which like how wild is that? And then she is trying to learn all that from Maggie and understand, what do I do about this? And Maggie's very cryptic about it
Yeah.
all.
Like, shouldn't she be more just, hey, here's how it works, because I could die any day now.
Yeah, like she
So,
has this beautiful monologue almost about the worlds within worlds and the web of life, and that life is inside every small seed. And it's actually a really beautiful scene, like from an animation standpoint, and all the flowers and the tree and everything, and what she's saying is lovely. But it's very like, okay, but what do I do now?
yeah.
What do I
Yeah.
do with this information? How do I become Queen Fairy or whatever it is I'm supposed to become if I don't really get this concept? You're kind of giving me this energy and not telling me what
Yeah.
do I go do.
Parents, if you're trying to get your kids to be passionate about the same things you are, give them the interesting stuff, not the boring shit. Just tell them how they can grow trees out of like they can grow entire forests out of one little seed,
I
as
don't want
opposed
little
to giving
seed.
all the lore behind. No, they don't care. The kids
They don't
don't
care
care.
about that bit. They just want
No.
to know, how do I do it? How's the trick? And she's real confident that Hexus is trapped. And She's a little too confident. And I had in my notes like famous last words. Of course, she's like, no, he's trapped for all eternity. But then you do see her, they cut away to just her, and she's like, maybe not. She knows
Yeah.
right away that maybe he's not. But I also think that's a disservice to people, like to her fairy kingdom, to be like, yeah, he's trapped forever. Don't worry about it. And then her be like, well, like maybe he's not. Maybe he's not trapped. I just don't see her do anything with it at that point where she goes and she checks and she sees the smoke and she's like, oh shit, it's maybe about to go down.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you're super magical. You can't do something like right now. It feels like you could do something right now. But then we wouldn't get the rest of the movie. So I guess it's
Also
fine.
feels like maybe she should have just killed Hexus instead of trapping him in a tree. Like, just shoot him in the head.
I don't think that's her energy. I mean,
No?
good pro tip. I don't know that she had a gun readily available. I don't think that she was channeling that into her fairy energies. But she traps him in a tree. That's a good second
I
option, I
guess
think.
that's a good second option. It doesn't end up working out, spoiler,
It's
but
such a gnarly looking tree too. I love that
yeah.
like he's in
Yeah.
this like evil looking tree and then it starts to sizzle when Zach sprays it
Sprays
with the
it,
spray
yeah.
paint. We're like, thanks, Zach. Way to go. What an idiot, right?
This
Um,
guy.
this guy, he's solely responsible. No, I guess it would have happened either way to some degree at some point, but you don't know for sure if that tree was going to be targeted or not. So it's hard not to be mad at Zach for
You
releasing
know what
Hexus
we can be
ultimately.
mad at Zach for, though? Is how many first dates, Mackenzie, has a guy told you you're a bodacious babe?
Oh my god, what a line. Okay, but really, I was younger then. Was this a thing that people said in 1992? I want to know. Did people really call people bodacious babes?
I don't like that you're inferring that I was not younger then.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just this is
Like Lamar?
we're asking the collective you. Like was
Oh,
this a
okay.
thing? I just don't feel like this is I feel like
Bodacious
people didn't
babe.
say that. I feel like people didn't say that. I could be wrong. But
I think
no, I
only
would
cartoon characters said it. Like
yeah,
the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, maybe.
no cartoon bro has ever called me a bodacious babe on a first date. No, that has not happened. But now I feel like I was apparently missing out. But yeah, their first date is real weird. They have like this very parts of it are very beautiful and romantic. Like I love the cave.
Are you
They're
talking about the fairy foreplay?
the
That's what I wrote down. I was like, I
oh my
assume
god.
this is foreplay for fairies. Like, chase me, chase me. Let's dance on the water. It's gonna change colors. Yeah.
Oh my god. No, I like the cave scene because it's got like reflective, like it's shiny. It's got the like kind of the sparkles from the stalagmites, stalactites, and then the prawns reflecting it and all that. So that's a cool, like for animation purposes, that's a scene that I think
Yeah.
is really cool for them. But you are kind of like, really? He's the one? We're gonna Zach? Really?
I think
Okay.
she's more or less Krista's just intrigued by him. She's not infatuated with him like he is with her. I think she's just like, yeah, let's see what this human guy is like.
Yeah, that's true. I think she's mostly just curious. You're totally right.
And
But
I mean, from what the movie tells us, her only other option is Pips. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's true, and he's not great either. I mean,
yeah.
in real life, Christian Slater, great option, but apparently she doesn't know that.
I mean,
Whatever.
it's weird when you look around at all the fairies in this. It turns out fairies are not that attractive of a race. This
Not
is yeah.
not the way they're animated here. That's
There's like
that's the
two good-looking ones, and the rest are, a little awkward.
the rest look a little weird for sure. Some unique looking folks in that community. But we got to talk about the best baddie. Baddie blows in, baddie Coda, Robin Williams
Hmm.
again. I love his whole like everything he says is a running social commentary of how much humans suck.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was like, preach, you're right, like 100%. And I have so many lines from this movie that I grew up just quoting. We would just say shit that Batty Coda said all the time. Like anytime we fell, it was, oh, gravity works. Like just so many nerd jokes, and I love his entrance. I just blew in from a biology lab. He's like he knows exactly where he came from, and he's got this little antenna on him,
Yeah.
and how it switches him, into these different modes, and it's frenetic and hilarious and silly, and it's just, yeah, what an entrance.
I still to this day use the line "Only fools are positive," and until rewatching
Yes.
this, I didn't know where I had pulled it from. I was like, "I
Oh,
know I'm
yeah.
quoting something," but it's like, "I'm
You
certain. Are you positive?" "Yes, only fools are positive." I
Only fools are
yeah.
positive, yep. I just yeah, I love that whole scene. I love his references. He does like a I love Lucy. He's like, "Lucy." He does I love Lucy. He does adios amigos, check please. And I used to say that all the time when I would leave a room. I thought I was so
Mhm.
funny. I would be like, "Adios amigos, check please." Um, yeah, he just has so many funny things. And every time he's flying, he's like, "Red light, green light," and he like runs into things and it's implied that like he can't see that great, but I think it's just he's like going in and out of these weird modes
It's
and
just Robin Williams, man. He just had this ability to make so many references in such a short period of time to shift in and out of different characters and different things from pop culture. And this is just one example of that. So yeah,
And
I
it
miss him.
shows up here out of context and somehow makes it funnier. You know what I mean? Like, it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily make sense here, but it somehow is still funnier. Like, he points
Yeah.
to his antenna and he's like, "You think nature did this? Think I put this in to get better reception?" Nobody there knows what he's talking about. Like, because he's talking to the
Right.
fairies when he says that. And everyone's like, "What do you mean better reception?" But he it's just so funny how it lands. And like you said, it's so rapid fire. It's
Yeah.
quick and witty and it's so funny.
And without him, this movie would not. I feel like if you stuck with
Wouldn't
the
work.
original script and you just kept Batty's original dialogue with whichever other actor you chose, I think this movie would not be as revered as it is.
No, I think he added so much. Even if he had been given a lot of these lines, which again, he improv'd a lot of them, but even if he had been given a lot of these lines and somebody else said them, I just don't think they would have landed the same way. He says lots of subtle things like, "I'm gonna fly with that, not run with that." He's like, "We can fly with that," instead of, "We can run with that idea." And he's just says comments to like reactionary comments. He's the commentary on everything that Krista and Zach are doing,
Yeah.
and it's always hilarious. You know, it's
Mhm.
such a good compliment to everything they're doing. And if you didn't have that person or that character there, especially by him, I agree. I don't think it would be nearly as funny for sure.
Totally. Totally agree. Can we spin off of all the Robin Williams chat and talk about Tim fucking Curry and how
I
awesome he is?
wavelength, love this wavelength for us because that's where I'm with you. I totally want to go there. And it's in my notes literally next. It was like
Mhm.
I in my notes it says fucking idiot lets Hexus out. And then it's dot dot dot. But at least it's Tim Curry. Like I was so excited. I love Tim Curry. His voice. I mean, you just can't get over
Yes.
like it literally oozes. You know what I mean? Like he is this toxic sludge. He is this pollution and it just ekes out of every word that he says.
And the
And
way that they structure it with the gurgles and the gulp, like when he
mhm.
first is the liquefied form,
Yeah.
just props to whoever designed the sound on that as well. Because yes, it's Curry's voice, but that whole sequence is incredible.
When it's
And
like the little sludgy
yeah,
like
and it's like "Blup,
yes.
blup,"
Blah,
making
blah.
those noises. That's we nailed it. And I also
We're
love
basically Tim Curry 2.0 is what we've learned.
I don't want people
I'm
to get
kidding.
mad at me. Okay, thank you.
I would
But
never
I
believe that.
also got flashbacks of watching Emperor's New Groove when he does the high-pitched laugh as the puddle because it sounds exactly like Yzma in as the cat in Emperor's New Groove, and
Oh,
it's like, "Ha,
yes.
ha, 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 ha." It's
Yeah,
very,
yeah,
very
yeah.
similar.
He does he captures all the little noises and sounds as part of his voice, and then obviously they complement it with effects, I'm sure, but it it follows the physical movement of the animation. Like
Mhm.
he's complementing the animation so well during all the phases of Hexus, to your point. Because even
Yeah.
when he's very first sprayed on the tree and it's just like a little sizzle, I would say his voice sizzles. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like Hexus, and the way
Hmm.
that ends, like he does a really good job of that. So, I mean, he's wildly good in this role, and I have the note too of, like, he gets his song at one point too, and I'm like, "What is it with villain songs? They are so good." Every time the villain songs are the best. Like, I just love it.
They apparently had to change some of the lyrics from that song because it was too sexual. The original I believe it's a cover, and the
It
lyrics
sounds
were
very
yeah,
sexy.
it's like toxic love. So they had to change a few of the verses to be a little less overt, and then they also had to pull Tim Curry back in to re-record some of his dialogue because it was too scary for
Yep.
kids in the initial screenings.
Yeah, he had to come tone it down, which God, how cool would it be to hear the original version though? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I
Yeah.
read that too, and I was immediately curious about, can we get the OG cut, like the PG-13 version? Because I need to hear it. Like, I bet it's incredible, and I love his song, but yeah, it's the downside of his song is, like, you like it, and, like, we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
supposed to like Hexus, we're not supposed to enjoy this super bad toxic sludge, and you're just like, "This song vibes." Like,
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Like,
Yeah, it's a banger for sure. I also want to call out the animators. I think you sort of touched on this of how his voice always lines up with the animation. And I think the animators on Hexus do an incredible job because I
mhm.
remember the shots of him with the skeleton, like as the layers of him strip off when he builds up into it, and then at the end when the layers of him strip off and he's a skeleton. Those scared the shit out of me as a kid. So I think
I
the
thought it
animators
looked
do a
so cool.
great job. He does the one shot where he does like the throat slit motion and the
Mhm.
smoke kind of parts. Oh, so good.
That is, I'm so glad you called that one out. That is one of my absolute favorites. It's like it's animated so well, it's so cleanly done, and it moves in a realistic way for smoke. You're like, "Okay, I see this. This
Mhm.
works." And then I agree when he goes from like smoke to sludge to skeleton to oil, and then he's flaming and like from the oil inside of
Yeah.
his body. Like, it's stunning, visually stunning. I think it's really, really an amazing shot, and I think it to your point could be super terrifying for kids. It
Yeah.
kind of checks out that they were like, "Ooh, we should tone down the voice a little because this is hardcore."
Yeah, you don't expect to see and granted, like, when I say if you for some reason haven't seen this, when I say skeleton, we're not talking like Disney's Haunted Mansion, like a bunch of bones. It's coated in this black sludge, so it
Sludge.
looks more like a decomposed body as opposed to just a skeleton, you know? So that it was very creepy as a kid.
Oh yeah, I mean, the animation here in general is very interesting, like, the glowy effects that they do, the quick sequences, especially of Batty flying is really cool. The shrinking sequence where they're, like, trying like, you see him shrink down and then try to shrink up and change onto all these different characters, I think is really neat. They have a lot of cool transition animation stuff that happens that's really, fun to watch, and then again, I think that cave scene is cool because it captures, like, the reflection and the color changing of the ponds and all that kinda stuff, so I think it's a real achievement in animation. It's not perfect. There are definitely things I
Yeah.
think that are kinda buggy, like, there are a few moments where it feels like Zach's not fully animated super great,
Yeah.
and his, like, coloring will change here and there, his
Mhm.
hair,
Yeah,
uh
I think we've said on previous episodes, I'm not big on looking up continuity errors. That's not I know some people are
mm-mm,
probably like, "Oh, look at the
but you can
mistake they
see
made."
them.
But in this, it's like there's things where the fairy's wings disappear from scene to scene and like the eye colors change, which might be intentional, but just little things like that where again, my theory earlier of people were probably really high making this, with the best intentions, but might show a little bit.
Yeah, there's some that are just at a glance, like you said. I also don't like to look them up, but I can see them here and there for
Yeah.
sure. But I also do think it's won over by the script. It's won over by
Yeah.
the story. It's there are enough really interesting, unique animated scenes that you're like, the animation is still really cool. All those ones we mentioned. Also, when the tree grows at the end
Mhm.
around Hexus is really neat, and how she furthers its growth besides them just closing it in by
Yeah.
giving Zach the seed, and then he helps it grow. So, like, there's just all these smaller things that turn into really memorable moments of the animation that I think make you kind of forget some of the silly stuff.
Yeah, I totally am. I think the animation is incredible. There is some silly stuff, but I think from a story perspective, upon rewatch, I don't necessarily love how it plays. Like, even though it is a very quick movie, I think it's another one that's like an hour and 20, an hour and 25.
Mhm.
But it just feels like a bunch of like there was a general concept of we want to make this movie about saving the rainforest, but we don't have a ton of conflict or like story to get us there. It feels like a bunch of thrown together scenes, and thank God for Robin Williams and Tim Curry who are there to make it make sense. But I don't love that Hexus doesn't really interact with any of the characters until the last 15 minutes of the film. He gets referenced and it's him sort of making his way toward FernGully. I get why that's happening, but it just feels like there could have been some more actual attempts to get the conflict between these characters to mean more. Meanwhile, it's just more Zach hitting on Krista and trying to win her over, and then her realizing he's a piece of shit. I'm still on the record as saying that, but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I can sort of see it. I'm trying to think back through it really quickly to see if I feel similarly. I feel like the implication is there that Magi and Hexus, I mean, they narrate this at the beginning, by the way. It's not so much
Hmm.
implication, but they say that essentially they have come to a head before and she traps him and wins and whatever. So I think to some degree, once there's an awareness of the leveler, quote unquote, and the logging that's happening, there's an immediate connection from everyone in the fairy world to this is Hexus. And so I think tensions are high, and I don't know how much interaction between the two have to happen, not that they couldn't, but I don't know how many have to happen for us to understand the escalation of the conflict and for him to be making his way this way. And you see the forest being cut down, and that's, I think,
Hmm.
visually really huge and threatening. It's threatening to them in a way that heightens their conflict, their experience. And I think it's intentional that him as Hexus is centered around his human influence. I think that's the point of the story, actually,
I
that it's
thought that
humans
was.
doing this and that this toxic force is influencing, controlling, and leading this technological advancement, but eating through this earth, this nature area, but it's done through the hands of people. And I think that's intentional, like that he is sided with them on that side of the conflict.
And that's how I feel like maybe they just had to market this movie that way to be like, we're trying to tell you that humans are the problem here, but we're going to
Mhm.
create this fictional villain who's kind of influencing them to take some of the weight. So we're not accusing the parents who take their kids to see this, but it's like, just fucking do better. I did love after the entire chaos in the forest is wiped out for the most part, and then the two, I forget Ralph and I forget the Tony, when they show up,
Mhm.
the drivers, and they're like, what happened here? And it's
Yeah.
like, we're all trying to find the guy that did this. That literally it was you. Like, what the fuck are
Yeah.
you talking
Yeah.
about?
You guys fucking did this. Well, I think there's something to be said for him being the influence, but humans not being innately good. I mean not being innately bad, I should say. I think that's an
Stupid.
important part of the message is
Yeah.
that humans don't necessarily want to destroy the planet. They need to be educated that this is wrong.
Hmm.
And what the evil here, the toxicity here, the villain here is the pollution, is the toxin, is the sludge. It's not actually people, but people can be made to do bad things to our planet if they don't understand the importance of it. And I think that's why the message is the way that it is. And but yeah, I think you see Zach as having to become the guy who's going to go educate them and be this ambassador for the rainforest, which is like
Hmm.
I have mixed feelings about because I don't know if he's going to be the best one to do it,
He's
but
not very well spoken. No one's
he's
gonna
not
believe a
super well
thing he says.
spoken. He
No.
doesn't seem like the sharpest tool in the shed, but at least you're happy that he learned something at the end. He's motivated to like go back and do a thing. But my favorite thing about that is that Chris is just like, okay, bye. Like,
See you
wish you the
later.
best.
Yeah.
Peace.
Won't miss you at all.
Hmm.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think the movie wraps up, and it's been a ride for sure. I
Oh,
ooh,
I have one thing that you just made me think of the ride.
let's hear it.
The flight of Batty and Zach is
Hmm.
like the last cool ride moment of this film where it feels like a flight sequence from like a Top Gun or something like that. But the impressions that Robin Williams goes through in that scene where he's doing like the Tora 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 reference, Betty
Yeah.
Davis,
The John
Luke
Wayne.
Skywalker,
Yeah.
John Wayne, Lock and Load, Scotty from Star Trek. Like he just does, I mean, name an impression and he does it in 30 seconds. And that is just such a fun scene. And it's a good way to kind of like wrap up this like battle sequence, I think. It's just it's awesome.
I also laughed when Pips, I think he's trying to help, but when Zach is caught in the window of the tree, what's the tree cutter device called?
The leveler.
when Zach is caught in the window of the leveler and Pips flies up and says, "It's time for your first lesson in
And he
flying," and he
just
shoves him
shoves
inside. He falls into a cup of
in a cup
coffee.
of
So I'm
coffee.
like, was Pips trying to murder him? Because if
Also,
that
like,
coffee was warm or hot, like he'd be dead.
I was gonna say, you hope it's cold. You hope it's been sitting there for a while and it's cold. He doesn't react, so I assume it's cold. But yeah, that was a rough shot. And he like turns the key to turn off the leveler, and they make it look like he's moving a mountain, basically. And you're like,
Right.
it's a little key. Come on, man.
I
But
think they
hey, he stops
actually.
it.
I'm sorry. I think they actually missed out on some opportunities, and it's hard to do because of the setting. But I did like the final sequence of Zach running through the leveler at such a small size. Like it was very Honey, I Shrunk the
Mm-hmm.
Kids of let's see them interact with these larger scale environments. Maybe could have done more with that. That could have been another opportunity to have sort of the villain
Mm-hmm.
be play more of a role in engagement with the characters earlier in the film. Just a thought. And the last thing that I want to call out that we haven't mentioned is how do you feel about Tone Loc showing up as a very sensual eating iguana and singing about how he loves to eat things? I didn't
That
get
is
that.
such a fun, weird cameo, I
Yeah.
will say. I think that whole animation sequence is very cool. And the song is fun, but I will agree that I think it's a little out of place.
Yeah.
Like it feels like the one thing that doesn't really fit. But I think in and of itself, it's a fun scene, and the song is fun, and it's got similar energy to the Hexa song, whatever. But I don't, yeah, it's not especially cohesive with the rest of the film for sure.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, part of me wants to say, based on what you said, of maybe they just had Tone Loc signed on and were like, hey, he wants to be in a Disney movie. Let's just find a part for him. And they were like, you
Right.
could play this iguana and just talk about, how you're going to eat this guy. But I will say that to its credit, this I think is one of the first Disney movies to incorporate. I mean, it's not the best hip hop and rap in the world, but you have Baddies rap, you have Tone Loc in this. They have some
Yeah.
some dance scenes. I think it's one of the earliest signs of that in a Disney film of them kind of diversifying a little bit.
Which is so 90s of them to adopt. Like, it's a good time to
Yeah.
do it, but like, yeah, you would have thought, you would think it would be more pervasive, and it's just not in their films.
Mhm.
But it's a good time to do it, and it is reflective of the time. And it's like the people are good for it as well. Like the people they choose to lean in on those moments are really good. So I think it's cool for that reason. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily fit. I think it's a pretty short film overall, and I think there were opportunities to dig in a little bit more into the story and some of those other sequences, like you're saying. But I do like that when it all comes to a head, and they've put Hexus in the tree and all of that, and he comes, Zach comes and talks to Krista. She's just like on this higher plane now. She's just kind of like over it, and she's just very trees over bros, like who even cares. But it is kind of switch has flipped for her, where all of a sudden she just like gets it. And
Yep.
I would have liked to see her transition like extended a little bit. You see her come out of the flower, and you see her like go and sacrifice herself, so to speak, to save FernGully, and all of that's beautiful. But like even just a little side sequence of her, like, I don't know, coming into some kind of knowledge, even if it's just visual, or like seeing that transition of her getting out of the tree and into the flower, like just seeing that a little bit longer would have been cool, I think, for her to then come out of it. And you're like, I get it. I get why all of a sudden she's the next Magi, she's gone through this whole like transition and
You
this.
wanted like Krista in the Matrix type
Yes.
moment, like waking up a Keon, like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want her to like come into her knowledge. I want to see that in action. So, cuz it's cool. She comes out and she's got all this power, and it's beautiful. But you're like, "Oh, I feel like I missed something." I feel like I missed like a cool sequence here that would have been nice to see.
Yeah.
I also think, fun fact, that Zach just starts to leave FernGully, and he's just like chilling in his new miniature size. Like, she says bye, he says bye. They're just like, peace, lovely to see you. I'm gonna go advocate for the rainforest as a little dude. Like, he doesn't ask to get turned back, is my favorite thing. He just starts walking off. I'm like, oh, so you're just gonna like do this little version? Like, cool. And then she changes him, but he hasn't
Well,
asked.
thank
Like,
goodness. Yeah.
he's just like, "Oh, okay, I'm big again." I was like, "What were you gonna do? I just want to know." Like,
Hey, everybody. We've got to keep the rainforest from getting cut down.
100%. I would totally buy that for sure. But anyway, all that to say, I think it's a overall like really fun movie. It's a good message, and I love the ending. Actually, the dedication at the end for our children and our children's children. And
Yeah.
I hope that if you do watch this and you share it with folks, that like the takeaway here is just let's just love our planet and take care of it for people to come because we need to.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so all that to say, we think it has a good message. There's some fun animation, amazing cast, obviously. What would you rate this baby?
This is a difficult one for me because talking it through, I feel like I didn't actually critique too much. It it feels more like a morality play than like a Disney film, which is, I mean that in a good way. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's missed opportunities with the storytelling. Like I said, I feel like the villain should have played more of a role than just being this slow rolling thing coming to confront them. But I think because of the performances from Robin Williams and Tim Curry, like it's hard to be too critical of this. Overall, I'd give it like a 6, 6.5, and some of that's for the message. I think without that, it's not an incredible film, but because of what it's trying to say and the dedication that we've talked about, like I'll give a benefit of the doubt. I'll give it like a 6.5.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I hear you. And that's, again, that's in line with a lot of what's out there as far as how people received it and rated it themselves. I will acknowledge that my rating comes largely from nostalgia, my aggressive love of the earth and tree hugger vibes.
But
But
yeah, but no,
I,
if I was being nostalgic, like when I was a kid, I would have given this like an 8 or a 9. So I'm
right.
looking at it from current view, like
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I hear you.
I give it like a solid 8.5 for me personally. And
Hmm.
I just so value again the message. And I think it's very fun for all the reasons we said, and the performances are all really incredible as well. But I just the nostalgia, the message, it just yeah, it still really hits for me. I had a great time watching this.
Awesome.
All right, folks. Well, like we said, we think it's a good one. Go give it a watch, share it with your friends, tell them to take care of the earth and love it a little. But thank you for joining us through that. And we are going to come back and wrap up. We're wrapping it up, right? We're going to wrap up
Last week of
anime.
anime.
Yeah, last week of anime is next week with Ratatouille. I think a Pixar is our first Pixar. I think it's going to be
For
our first
this
Pixar of the
month? Oh,
month.
you mean overall? I don't know that we've done any Pixar in the entire
Wow. Yeah. So
podcast.
maybe our first Pixar. I think it's a good one. It's a good one to
And
start.
I'm gonna come right out and say it. I've never seen Ratatouille.
What? You
I
didn't tell
just
me that when we talked about
the
this.
thought of a rat in a kitchen, I'm gonna hate it. I bet rats
Oh
in
my
kitchens.
God.
I'm just
All
kidding. I know
right.
that's the point of the movie, right?
I was going
See
to
what I
say,
was
this
doing?
is going to
Yeah.
be Lamar's turn to eat crow next week. And he's like, oh my God, this movie was so good. Okay.
Put
Well,
rats in all the kitchens.
put rats in all the kitchens, watch the movie. But for now, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers.